Welcome to Trudge the Road. Trudge the Road, sponsored by COLLEEN Treatment Centers. COLLEEN, a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment with treatment facilities in Pennsylvania, Florida, Texas, offices in Bermuda, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. They can be reached by calling 1-800-854-6023, or you can go to their website, caron.org. That's CARON.org. We're your hosts. I'm Rich, a recovered drug addict.
My name is Jerry, and I'm a sober alcoholic.
Jerry, if you will, please tell us, why do we do this show?
Thank you, Rich. This program is dedicated to people like you and me, those of us who suffer from the disease of addiction to alcohol and to drugs. And every bit as important, the family members and friends. You suffered tremendously. We know you have a whole lot of questions, and that's what this show is dedicated to, providing some answers for you. And again, with God's good grace, hopefully a solution to this magnificent dilemma, addiction.
If you'd like to catch prior episodes, you can go to YouTube. We have a YouTube channel up there. It's youtube.com/Trudge the Road Radio. And if you don't put any spaces between the words, Trudge the Road Radio, every single show that we've done will come up right there, and you can check them out.
Sweet.
Facebook. We have a Facebook page. We'd love for you to like us. Just go to Facebook and type Trudge the Road Radio in there, and we will come up, and you can like us. You can catch up with what's going on in the show, and we throw stuff out there on a pretty regular basis.
Absolutely. And if you're within the recovering community and you're a fan of Trudge the Road, first, thank you very, very much. But help us spread the word. If we're on a local radio station that is in your community, please tell people about Trudge the Road, or in those non-related AA announcements that you may have at your meeting, bring up the fact that you've discovered this great program about recovery that you can catch on YouTube or your local radio station.
Coming up in just a little bit, we're going to talk with COLLEEN. And you know COLLEEN.
Yeah, COLLEEN and I have been friends for, 4, 5, 6 years. I can't remember how long. I don't know her well, but I know her through the recovering community, and she's a magnificent person. She's got that energy. It's that spirit, when somebody really has identified with the program and all of the promises are coming true in their life, it just kind of rubs off on yours. And that's COLLEEN in a nutshell, and I can't wait to find out about her story. I know it's going to be great.
Well, it is, and she comes from a different aspect than a lot of people do. She has a family. She didn't end up like you and I, you in a tree. And,
you behind the dumpster.
But her bottom was a different place, and
exactly.
as you always say, the bottom is a state of mind.
Yeah, Skid Row is a state of mind, but just to, give people statistics, because we all have that idea in our head of what a drug addict and alcoholic looks like. 3% of people who are affected by this disease are the ones who actually end up on the streets, or those ones that you may stereotype as a drug addict or alcoholic. The other 97% are in your neighborhood. They're in your church. They're in your office. People who are still, if you will, functioning somewhat, but they're right here amongst us, and this disease is everywhere. And in our opinion, it's the major health issue within our country.
This first segment, we want to talk about fear. It is one of the toughest areas of recovery, and that is dealing with fear of the future. So once you find yourself in recovery, you can find yourself fearing things. I'm talking about the telephone ring. I'm talking about the mail. I'm talking about situations. I'm talking about projection.
Really, what you're talking about is the pathology of the disease. That is the one emotion that affects all of us. That is just synonymous with anybody who has the disease of addiction. It's that fear, unexplained fear, undefinable fear, scared to death and don't know what you're scared of. That's what it's like to be an alcoholic or a drug addict, trying to figure out this fear, this insane fear that's coming from somewhere that we can relieve when we take drugs or alcohol into our system. It's medicine for us. And this is the one thing that really can get completely blown out of proportion when that fear thing starts. And when we try to treat it with alcohol and drugs, it's like this. Let me give you an example of being a drug and alcohol treatment counselor. I used to perform this experiment periodically where I would tell the people in group that I'm this mad scientist, and today I've got this invisible beaker and we're going to make this alcoholic, What do we need to put in there? Well, they all can identify with fear, so I'll start things off. Let's put fear into the beaker. And then what else? And someone, put in hate, put in resentment, put in loneliness, we get all of those feelings in there, and I'd shake it all up. And I say, do we have one? Do we have one? Is one here? Is that an alcoholic? Is that a drug addict? Yes, you've made one. But what's missing? The alcohol. You see? And I'm not saying that it's innately that we know, but we do have an understanding, even really before we get here, of what the problem is. The problem is in what's in that invisible beaker right there. That is the disease of addiction. Now, when we take alcohol, which is a solvent, and pour that on top of those feelings, they dissipate, you know. But like any other solvent, when it dries off, they come back and they're like infected. They just feel that much worse, you know. So we continue that cycle over and over and over again. Now, the difference between us, addicted people, and non-addicted is I would do that exact same experiment, if you will, with the family members on Family Day, where I would take this invisible beaker and we're going to make an alcoholic out of it. What should I put in here first? Well, they couldn't scream alcohol fast enough because they think that's the problem, and it's not. It's the solution to our problem. And the big problem is the one you've just addressed here, the one emotion that affects all of us. And it's as I've said it before, and I'll say it again, I don't even think they should call this the disease of addiction. I think it should be called the disease of fear, and alcohol and drugs are my medicine.
Well, one of the ways to battle fear, of course, is also by doing the 12 steps. And we talk about fear and once you're in recovery, and a lot of it has to do, at least in my situation, is I suffer from the trauma of the addiction. I mean, you know, I mentioned this before, from 1979 all the way to the year 2001, I was either drunk or I was high. And that's a long time. And that's a lot of experiences. And that's a lot of stunting of growth as well. So during that time period, I was afraid, you know, nothing seemed to work out. There was always that dark cloud over me. And of course, as we've talked about before, I blamed it on every single thing out there except for the alcohol or except for the drugs. It was your fault. It was her fault. It was the job's fault. It was society's fault. It was the invisible dark cloud. I mean, it was always something else. But when you get into recovery, now you have the trauma of all that. It almost feels like a post-traumatic stress syndrome. And maybe that's what it is.
I think so. You know, we have done and experienced emotional degrees of behavior where the emotional consequences were so severe, it's impossible not to carry them with you. Thank God we've got this program, which is designed to be able to deal with them so they don't haunt us in the future.
And we, of course, suffer from extreme bouts of projection. And it's something that, you know, we do on a regular basis. You and I talk all week long. And I can't count how many times you and I throw a scenario out there and then we start biting on it a little bit until one of us goes, hey, wait, stop.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, just recently with, you know, your back issues,
exactly.
You had the projection going on. We constantly project a negative consequence.
I think it's worse than that. We project worst case scenario.
Every time.
Right.
Every single time. If it comes to, hey, look, I got a call from a number that's an 800 number. I wonder what they want. It's got to be some bill I didn't pay from, 1997.
That's that trauma that you're talking about that we experienced within our addiction that comes back to haunt us today, because we always go to the worst case scenario because that's our experience. Our experience has always been the worst thing happened. And when you have this disease, and this is really important, you should know this, it's not how much we drink, it's not how often we drink, it's what happens when we drink. And when I drink and take drugs and things happen, and they're bad things. And that's what we have to judge from, is these horrible consequences we've had to experience because of our disease.
And, the thing is, neither one of us have a crystal ball. No one does, and if you do have one, please call me and let me know. But for some reason, we think our vision of the future is exactly what's going to happen.
And that's really part of the illness of the disease.
Yeah.
That's why we need to stay in today and live 24 hours, one day at a time, because our projection always has, it's like planning with emotional consequences. This is going to happen. This is how I'm going to feel. This is how you're going to feel. This is what's really, and then that scenario occurs and all intellect goes right out the window and you're just feeling what you think is going to happen. And how often are you right? Never.
You're right. Never. But I got to tell you that for me, that is one of the toughest things that I've had to deal with in recovery is negative projection. I constantly am planning out scenarios. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes I plan out, and I just call them fantasies and pipe dreams, but sometimes I plan out scenarios that, that have positive outcome. But,
and why not?
But the truth of the matter is, and I think you said it, is just to stay in the now. I'm great at telling everybody stay in the now, but doing it myself sometimes is very difficult.
It's getting to that, and I'm not talking about you here. Get to that point where you're completely comfortable within your own skin, and that is a process because there's a lot to get through. And we specifically have to deal with this, the fourth step of the 12 steps, which is taking a fearless and moral inventory of ourselves. And what that is an accounting of our behavior, everything we have done. everything, even those shame-based things that we have done, have to be listed. Now, there is a direct guide within the big book that tells you exactly how to do it. You do it in columns, and you make this accounting, and that's what it is. What stops people, a couple of things on this. One, it's just counterintuitive. Who'd want to do this? No one would want to take a fearless moral inventory of themselves.
Right.
We have to. It's all in the process of getting better, and it has to be complete. The other thing that will stop us is that we'll, now look at, we have taken it out of our head and put it on paper what we did, and there can be emotional repercussions from that. That's what you want to try to avoid within the 4-step. Just continue with the accounting. We'll deal with its emotional ramifications and the solution in the 5th step. It's not easy to do, but it has to be complete. And if you don't include everything, there's going to be a problem. And myself as an example, and it was always shame-based. It was some shame-based behavior that I was just going to take with me to the grave because I was embarrassed. I'm not telling anybody that. And so I wouldn't write it down in a 4-step. Obviously, it wouldn't get processed in the 5th step. And then what would happen is it would come back, that behavior, and haunt me. And it would start to bother me. Then I would start to get guilty. Then here would come shame. And after shame, always Mr. Fear shows up. And right after Mr. Fear shows up, Mr. Beam shows up. And that's when I'm drinking again, because all of that now has just scared me to death, and it has to go. I don't have the emotional capability to be able to process that. The only thing I can do is anesthetize that. So that process again of the cycle of drinking has begun.
COLLEEN is coming up here in just a few minutes, and she's got a wonderful story. This is Trudge the Road. It's sponsored by COLLEEN Treatment Centers. COLLEEN, a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment. COLLEEN specializes in men's and women's services, as well as young adult males and females, plus a relapse program and outpatient services. If you're concerned about yourself or a loved one, call 1-800-854-6023, or you can go to their website, COLLEEN.org. That's CARON.org. Jerry sits down with COLLEEN next here on Trudge the Road on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
You're listening to Trudge the Road. Coming up, Jerry sits down and talks to COLLEEN, who has a very compelling and emotional story about how she came to find sobriety. That's next on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
There is a new face of recovery, and you see it in the pages of Renew Magazine and at RenewEveryday.com. Renew and RenewEveryday.com are changing the face of recovery for good. Each issue is filled with positive role models, life-affirming stories, encouragement, and ideas to help any life in recovery. Whether you're already enjoying an addiction-free life, have a loved one facing his challenges, or are considering recovery, Renew and RenewEveryday.com can support and inspire you. Join us. Check out RenewEveryday.com to learn more.
Hi, this is Rich, your co-host for the Trudge the Road radio program, and there's a question I get all the time, and that is, how do we catch prior episodes of Trudge the Road if we miss the radio show? And it's very simple. You just go to youtube.com and in the search engine, type in, without any spaces, Trudge the Road Radio, and all our shows will come up. We also invite you to like our Facebook page, which can be found by typing Trudge the Road Radio with spaces into the search engine. And thank you from Jerry and myself for listening to Trudge the Road.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Trudge the Road. Trudge the Road is sponsored by COLLEEN Treatment Centers. COLLEEN is a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment. With treatment facilities in Pennsylvania, Florida, and Texas, we have offices in Bermuda, Boston, New York City, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. COLLEEN can be reached by calling 800-854-6023 or by going to their website, which is CARON.org. That's CARON.org. Thank you very much, and to all of those of you in the recovering community who have helped to spread the word of Trudge the Road, we really do appreciate that. This is a program dedicated to people who suffer from the disease of addiction to alcohol and to drugs, and every bit as important. Your family and your friends, they suffer tremendously, and we know that you have a lot of questions. Our goal here is to do what we can to answer some of those questions, and with God's good grace, hopefully provide a solution to this incredible dilemma. Again, thank you for those of you who've picked us up on YouTube, and to the recovering community, please continue to spread the word that Trudge the Road is available, if not in your local radio station, at YouTube in the search engine. Put Trudge the Road Radio, and they'll pop up, and you've got a meeting there at your fingertips. We have with us a guest who's an old friend of mine. We've got together over dinner at some of the festivities thrown by the COLLEEN Treatment Centers over the years, and it's really an honor that you would come here and be with us on Trudge the Road. COLLEEN, good morning.
Good morning.
It's great to have you here. Tell us just a little bit about your story. Now, alcoholism, before it ever affected you, was a predicating factor in your family, your mother specifically. Is that correct?
Yes, both my parents were alcoholics. But, my mother was more in my life than my father was. So she's more of my story. And, at a very young age, I saw the effects and the damages that alcohol could do to a family. And I made myself a promise that I was never, ever going to be like my mother. And I worked very hard for many years to be the opposite of her. And I certainly was never going to be an alcoholic like she was. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, at the age of 50, my mother died of the disease of alcoholism. And just a few days before that happened, I confronted her about her drinking. And she denied it. And the end of our conversation wasn't a happy one. Mm-hmm. I got very angry, which typically is not my behavior. And I was very honest with how I felt about her and her drinking. And I told her that I basically hated her and I never wanted to see her again. And 2 days later, she died from cirrhosis of the liver. And, that was a piece of guilt that I carried around for a long, long time. But what I mean by I tried to live my life the opposite of her is my mother was always late. I'm always on time or early. My mother was not an organizer. I even alphabetized my spices. And the alcoholism, as time went on and I saw that maybe my drinking was out of hand, I could not admit that to myself or to anyone else because if I did, then I would be a failure. And that would mean that I was just like my mother.
Mm-hmm. Now, Big, if I could somewhat paint a picture of your life at this time, is that you're certainly not in a dire straits. You're living basically the American dream at this point, correct?
Yes and no. I'm the oldest of three, so I automatically assumed the role of caretaker. No one in my family ever went to college, and I was bound and determined to make that happen. Most of my life, I just always wanted to fit in. And I wore those different masks. Like if someone wanted me to be one way, I became that way for that person to appease them and to be liked. And then if someone wanted me to be a different way, I would change for that person. And basically, I just wanted to be loved. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to be liked. I just wanted to fit in. And I never knew where that place was for me. So alcohol was introduced to me in high school. And although I was fearful of it, I loved the power that it gave me. Mm-hmm. And off to the races I was.
Well, you had made the conscious decision not to become whom your mother was or to become an alcoholic. So and to a certain degree, and to all of us who suffer from the disease, that gives us permission.
Yes.
Right. So did you feel now, and in my own, and I've talked to you about this before, the very first time that I took that drink, that it worked for me, when everybody else got kind of silly and a little bit goofy, and all of a sudden I got okay. For the first time, I wasn't terrified about what happened yesterday and petrified about tomorrow. I was all right then. It worked for me. Did you have a similar experience?
Yes. The power that alcohol gave me, I felt prettier, smarter, funnier, more at ease in social settings. It helped me to be the person that I wanted to be. And as we know, that didn't last long term. And I continuously, when bad things happened as a result of my alcoholism, I just kind of wrote it off. Well, everyone else is doing it. Or, if I hurt someone's feelings, well, I didn't really want to be friends with them anyway. So the consequences, I was very fortunate for a long time. And still I had that mindset that I am not going to be like my mother. I'm not going to be an alcoholic.
It seems atypical, too, that in the sense where you say that you're a person of great order, where everything on the outside, it looks good when you're looking in. And, that, I think, gives us, at least it did me, license, if you will, an opportunity to be able to continue, and that rationalization process that seems to be really predominant at this stage of your alcoholism. All right, in the process, you grew up in northern New York, correct?
Yes, I grew up in Syracuse, New York.
Syracuse, a little chilly up in Syracuse.
It is. Winters are long.
Now, then you assimilated down to the Philadelphia area. When was that?
That was in 1998.
Okay.
What had happened is, as I mentioned, I was bound and determined to go to college. So I worked hard, saved my money, put myself through college, got a great job. I grew up on welfare and food stamps, so I was bound and determined to be, live the American dream.
Right.
That was my goal. And I was a survivor and I was a fighter. And I was going to succeed no matter what. And, relationships for me were very, very difficult. If there were 5 people on my right and 5 people on my left, I gravitated to the people that treated me badly because that's what I felt comfortable with. So my relationships were disasters from the beginning. And in my late 20s, I met this wonderful man, Dave. And of course, we met in an Irish bar, and we dated for a while. And he did bring up the topic of my drinking. He thought I drank too much, and my reasoning was, well, I'm working 2 jobs. I'm going back to school for another degree. I deserve to party, and just because you're a wimp, doesn't mean that I should back off. But I really, really liked Dave a lot, and I saw a future with him. So I cut back on my drinking. And because I could control that and not drink, of course, I didn't think I had a problem, so I didn't, stumble into the doors of AA. And we got married, and we had our first son. And in the midst of all that was going on in our life in Syracuse, because, see, everything was perfect. I had a beautiful home. We belonged to the country club that my mother used to waitress at. And life was grand. I took up golf. My house was perfect. But slowly inside, I was dying. And Dave came home and said, guess what? The greatest thing happened. I've been offered a job in the Philadelphia area. And my response was, well, you didn't take it, did you? Because, see, I don't like change. And my life was perfect. But we moved to the Philadelphia area in 1998. And that was pretty devastating for me because I come from a very large, extended Irish Catholic family. And just everything was in place. I had my drinking buddies, my drinking routines. And my husband was disrupting all that and transplanting me to a different area. And I remember Dave saying to me, well, if you don't like the way things are, Colleen, then change them. So I sought out friends. I love to entertain. I love to cook. So we had great parties. And if the parties were at our home, then I could drink more. I could hide it better. And from 1998 until 2006, things just spiraled out of control. By then we had our second son, and my husband was traveling constantly. And, I was home alone with 2 little kids, didn't know many people. And I'd open that bottle of wine at 8 o'clock, and then it became 6 and then 4 and, the rest of the story. And I was scared and I was alone, but I couldn't tell anyone because of that shame and the guilt. And if I told people, what would they think of me? And there was still that mentality of wanting to be loved, wanting to be liked. And slowly I just got deeper and deeper in despair. And one night at my husband's company Christmas party, I got pretty wasted. And my husband was not happy at all. And he said to me, Colleen, go in the house, send the babysitter out. When I come back, we're going to have a long talk. Well, we never had that long talk because when Dave came home, I was passed out at the bottom of the stairs. And at the top of the stairs were our 2 little boys crying. Is Mommy okay? And when I came to and I saw their faces, it brought me back to that time where I made that promise that I was never going to be like my mom and I was never going to do to my own children what she had done to me. But that wasn't enough. I figured Dave would calm down after a couple weeks. I'd be a good girl. And what ended up happening was, my husband talked to people and they recommended treatment. And so in March of 2005, I finally picked up the phone and I called this rehab facility and I said, hi, my name's Colleen and I'd like to come stay at your rehab sometime in mid-May.
Get a reservation in advance.
And the lady wasn't very nice to me on the phone, but I really showed them because I went on May 15th of 2005. And, the reason I can say that my treatment at Karen was so wonderful is because I went somewhere else first.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, we want to talk about that, catch up a little bit more on what it's been like. And I've never known you to be anything but a beautiful lady. It's just, it's even hard for me being an alcoholic myself to still, sometimes I still have that fake picture, that we are these people who, live in the streets, and that is not the face of alcoholism at all. You're certainly not that, and we're certainly pleased that you're here. We're going to find out a little bit about your treatment and about what it's like now and the miracle of recovery when we come back with more of Trudge the Road. Trudge the Road is sponsored by COLLEEN Treatment Centers. COLLEEN is a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment. COLLEEN specializes in men's and women's services, as well as young adult males and females, plus a relapse program with outpatient services. Now, if you are concerned about yourself or a loved one, you can call 800-854-6023 or go to their website, which is CARON.org. That's CARON.org. We'll be back with Colleen and more on Trudge the Road. This is the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
You're listening to Trudge the Road. Coming up, Jerry continues his discussion with Colleen, and I would recommend keeping the box of tissues out because her story is honest and emotional. That's next on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
There is a new phase of recovery, and you see it in the pages of Renew Magazine and at RenewEveryday.com. Renew and RenewEveryday.com are changing the face of recovery for good. Each issue is filled with positive role models, life-affirming stories, encouragement, and ideas to help any life in recovery. Whether you're already enjoying an addiction-free life, have a loved one facing his challenges, or are considering recovery, Renew and RenewEveryday.com can support and inspire you. Join us. Check out RenewEveryday.com to learn more.
Hi, this is Rich, your co-host for the Trudge the Road radio program, and there's a question I get all the time, and that is, how do we catch prior episodes of Trudge the Road if we miss the radio show? And it's very simple. You just go to youtube.com and in the search engine, type in, without any spaces, Trudge the Road Radio, and all our shows will come up. We also invite you to like our Facebook page, which can be found by typing Trudge the Road Radio with spaces into the search engine. And thank you from Jerry and myself for listening to Trudge the Road.
Welcome back to Trudge the Road, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jerry. I'm an alcoholic. Trudge the Road is sponsored by COLLEEN Treatment Centers. COLLEEN, if you don't know, is a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment. They have treatment facilities in Pennsylvania, Florida, and Texas, with offices in Bermuda, Boston, New York, Philly, and Washington, D.C. You can reach them by calling 800-854-6023 or go to their website, which is CARON.org. That's CARON.org. There to help you and to answer maybe some of the questions that you've got about yourself or a loved one. And that's what this radio program, Trudge the Road, is all about. It is dedicated to people who suffer from the disease of addiction to alcohol and to drugs. And, of course, you family members, we know how incredibly you suffer. We know that you have a lot of questions. We hope to provide some answers here for you and ultimately, with God's good grace, bring some solutions to the dilemma that we all face. Colleen is our guest here with us today, and she just, gave us a very moving story about what brought her to recovery and to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and to the treatment center or centers. So many of us, it's plural, certainly in my case. But if you will take us to that date back in May where you decided, I'm going to go to treatment on May 15th, pick it up there and kind of tell us what happened and what brought you to where you are today.
Well, I only stayed in this treatment center 11 days, and they didn't give me the tools to live a sober life. They did tell me to go to an AA meeting, which I did. I'll never forget. It was a Sunday morning, a couple minutes before 10. I sat chain smoking in my car, and I went inside the meeting, and it dawned on me as I was sitting there that I wasn't supposed to be there, because people shared that they had DUIs and had lost their families and their jobs, and see, none of that stuff happened to me. So, I got out the door as quick as I could. And, I continued with my drinking and the lies and the unmanageability. And one day I remember looking in the bathroom mirror, and I didn't recognize the person looking back at me. And the fear and the shame. And I kept thinking my husband and boys were better off without me. And my drinking just became out of control. I started drinking in the morning before I got my kids up from school. I had the shakes. My kids would come home from school and they wouldn't know which mommy would be there. Would it be the nice, friendly mommy or the mean, drunk mommy? And it came to a point where I showed up at my son's lacrosse game drunk. And my husband said, that's it. And he kicked me out of the house. And I was quite pissed, but it was the greatest thing he could have ever done. And at that moment in the hotel room with my big bottle of wine, I had a moment of clarity, and I picked up that phone and I told this person, I need help. And she recommended I go to treatment. And I said, oh, I already did that for 11 days and that didn't work real well. And she said, no, this is a different place. And I arrived here at COLLEEN in May of 2006. And my journey began. And the interesting part is I, like many others, wasn't going to stay very long because they were going to realize that maybe I drank too much, but I didn't have a problem because, see, I couldn't be like my mom. And, the people here were so wonderful. They accepted me no matter what. They believed in me and they gave me hope. And when I was transferred over to the primary care unit, many of the women there talked about extended care. And I thought, wow, these women are really sick, And, 2 weeks into my primary care stay, the therapist recommended extended care for me. And I was not happy. And, I was kind of up against the wall with my husband and my whole home life situation. And so I went to extended care here on COLLEEN's campus, the Rose Kearney House. And I was not happy. I went kicking and screaming. And for a whole month over there, I was still stuck because I didn't get the spiritual part of this program. That was that was really, really difficult for me. I grew up in a strict Catholic home, and my God was a punishing God, and I was going to hell already anyway. So,
we grew up with the same God.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I was scared. I was fearful, and I didn't know how to create a different higher power in a sober life. And I learned how to do that here. I learned how to live a sober life. I was given the tools, and off I went home, which was really, really scary. And I just put one foot in front of the other. I couldn't go home to my husband and kids and say, I'm sorry, or I promise, because those words didn't mean anything.
Right.
I had said them so many times. And, my first year was hard, but I just hung on for dear life. I went to AA meetings and I shared at meetings, and I told them I didn't want to be part of their little club, and they told me, keep coming back.
Yeah.
So I did. And, before I knew it, I had a year, and I felt the changes physically and emotionally. And I remember driving my car on 202 going, oh my gosh, Colleen, who are you? Like, how did you get so lucky?
Mm-hmm.
And, it's often difficult to put into words how wonderful my life is today. My husband and my kids are my huge supporters. And it came a point where I needed to include them in my recovery world. And, they talk about the promises, and I often thought, well, what the heck do those mean? And for example, when I was 8 months sober, my son, who was 9 at the time, told me to close my eyes when I tucked him into bed. And he recited the Serenity Prayer because he had heard me say it so many times over and over when I had really tough days. And, my anniversary is May 8th, 2006, and every month up to this point, my kids still remember. In fact, my oldest is in college now, and on the 8th of October, he sent me a text, happy anniversary, Mom, even though we don't count months after we have years. And, it's just been unbelievable. My husband often says that so much good came from a bad situation. And my higher power started putting all these service commitments in my path because I wasn't sure what I wanted to be when I grew up in recovery. And I'm where I'm supposed to be.
Well, explain a little bit about what a service commitment is within the recovering community.
Well, for example, in the rooms of AA, I was asked at 6 months sober to be the coin person for my home group.
And that coin person is?
That's someone who acknowledges people that are counting days or months and years, their anniversaries with a medallion. And that just brought me so much joy, not just only the old timer who was celebrating maybe 10, 15 years, but to the newcomer that was walking in that door and needed that 24-hour coin. Because, I don't ever want to forget what that's like. I don't ever want to forget that pain of walking through that door. In fact, a lot of my friends often tease me, Colleen, you've been sober almost 6.5 years. You can't be a newcomer anymore. But that's so important to me to not forget. And I have the honor of speaking up here once a month to the patients. And out of all the service commitments I do, that brings me the most joy and hope.
And one of those things that was stated to me by a mutual friend of ours is that you are that one person who truly believes you can't keep it unless you give it away.
Yes. And, my counselor over at the Rose Kearney House said that to me. And, there were many things she said to me that I didn't quite get right away. And the more I do, the more I get, the more filled up I am, the more joy I have in my own life. And I thoroughly believe, there's so many things I don't go looking for that just come to me, and this, I'm supposed to give it away. Mm-hmm. This is what I'm supposed to do in my recovery.
You're talking about basically, which is your spiritual experience, this growth and the wonderful feelings that you're having, this breakthrough. Does it continue, this relationship you have with a power greater than yourself? What I'm asking is what is that like today, and how does that play a role in the joy that you're experiencing?
Well, I have to turn it over, and that isn't always easy for me, but I just let my higher power lead. My higher power goes with me everywhere. When I spoke about struggling to find that higher power, I never had an imaginary friend as a young girl. So why not have one at my age?
Sure.
And that's how I created my higher power. My higher power goes everywhere with me. My higher power sometimes is a male figure, sometimes it's a female figure, and sometimes it's a small child. And I just say, okay, help me use you to bring someone hope. To show them that, a life in recovery can be beyond your wildest dreams. Today I can have it all. I can have it all, even in the worst of times.
It's even if times are bad, you can still experience the joy that you're talking about right now.
Yes, because with the help of my sponsor, the Rooms of AA, and my support system, because today I'm not alone. For so many years, I was all alone. And today I'm not. I'm surrounded by so many people that I pick up the phone and I call when things aren't going well. And when things aren't going well, I turn it around. There's always a piece of gratitude in that huge pile of mess. There's always, even if it's only one thing. And that's where I keep my focus.
Coming to the conclusion that this is a disease, and it certainly is, and one that you didn't ask for but have, and having made that spiritual connection to be able to bring it to resolution is, and disagree with me if you would like, but a miracle.
It is a miracle.
It is. It's a miracle for you. It's a miracle for me, and it's a miracle for everybody who is in recovery or who is possibly thinking about it, and to those who are associated with us, specifically family. Now, you made a comment that it certainly has improved a great deal. Has your family, have your boys and your husband been part of your journey in recovery?
They have, and in so many ways. When I came to treatment at 45 years of age, my first thought was, well, what am I going to do on my 50th birthday? I mean, here I was thinking 5 years out, and on my 50th birthday, which is my birthday's on Halloween, it happened to fall on a Sunday. Mm-hmm. And so, well, of course, I have to come to chapel. And I wasn't worried about turning 50. What I was struggling with was my mother died at the age of 50. So I came up here to chapel to share that morning, and when I left home, my husband and boys were fast asleep. Teenagers, they sleep in. And when I stood up at chapel on Sunday morning to share, I looked up, and walking down the center aisle was my husband and my two boys, dressed in shirt and tie, which I don't see very often. They had this all planned to come and surprise me at chapel on my 50th birthday.
What a gift. What a gift. That is amazing. COLLEEN, you're an absolutely amazing girl. You really are. And you took me back to my own times in treatment when I was sitting there worried about the fact that how am I not going to have a glass of champagne the day my daughter gets married? she was 2, and I was just terribly worried. How's that ever going to happen? She was married years ago and it never was even an issue, but I do understand. I understand that feeling. And today, I think that the joy that you are experiencing is the joy that you deserve. I'm glad that the disease has been put in its place by Alcoholics Anonymous and by the Care and Treatment Centers. And I ask and beg of you to continue to do what you're doing because it is significant and you help so many others. Just by being around people, there's a certain glow about you that we'll call grace, and it's wonderful, and we want you to keep hopefully coming back to visit us here on Trudge the Road.
Thank you.
All right, keep coming back. That is Colleen. Thank you very, very much for coming by. Trudge the Road, which is sponsored by Care and Treatment Centers. Karen is a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment. Karen specializes in men's and women's services, as well as young adult males and females, plus a relapse program and outpatient services. Listen, if you're concerned about yourself or as a loved one that you're concerned about, here's their phone number. It's 800-854-6023. Or you can go to the Karen website. It's CARON.org. There are people there who will help you. And that's what this show is all about, trying to help people who suffer from this disease as well as those affected by it. My name is Jerry. I'm a sober alcoholic, and we'll be back with more of Trudge the Road.
You're listening to Trudge the Road. Coming up, Rich and Jerry discuss the promises and how important it is in your recovery. That's next on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
There is a new face of recovery, and you see it in the pages of Renew Magazine and at RenewEveryday.com. Renew and RenewEveryday.com are changing the face of recovery for good. Each issue is filled with positive role models, life-affirming stories, encouragement, and ideas to help any life in recovery. Whether you're already enjoying an addiction-free life, have a loved one facing his challenges, or are considering recovery, Renew and RenewEveryday.com can support and inspire you. Join us. Check out RenewEveryday.com to learn more.
Hi, this is Rich, your co-host for the Trudge the Road radio program, and there's a question I get all the time, and that is, how do we catch prior episodes of Trudge the Road if we miss the radio show? And it's very simple. You just go to youtube.com and in the search engine, type in, without any spaces, Trudge the Road Radio, and all our shows will come up. We also invite you to like our Facebook page, which can be found by typing Trudge the Road Radio with spaces into the search engine. And thank you from Jerry and myself for listening to Trudge the Road. Welcome back to Trudge the Road. It's sponsored by Care and Treatment Centers. Karen's a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment with treatment facilities in Pennsylvania, Florida, Texas, and offices in Bermuda, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. They can be reached by calling 1-800-854-6023, or you can go to their website, caron.org. That's CARON.org. We're your hosts. I'm Rich, a recovered drug addict.
My name is Jerry, and I'm a sober alcoholic.
Jerry, for everybody, one more time, why do we do this show?
This program is dedicated to people who suffer from the disease of addiction to alcohol and drugs. Also, family members and friends, people who are petrified because they're watching this catastrophe happen right in front of their face. Listen, we know you've got a lot of questions. That's why we're here, hopefully, to answer some of those questions, get you some help, and with God's good grace, provide a solution to the dilemma that the alcoholic or drug addict is facing.
Yeah, a big thank you to Colleen for coming in. Colleen, it can be somewhat intimidating to come in here into this room.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You've got Matt, the producer, sitting over there. You've got me. You've got you. And when you come into a room, you kind of, I guess your vision of it probably is a little bit different than what it is.
Right. You're walking into a studio and microphones and computers all over the place.
Sure. And then you're going to lay out your story in front of everybody. So a big thank you to Colleen for coming in.
Takes guts, man. It really does.
Yeah, and being so honest with us and everybody as she shared her story.
You folks in the recovering community, thank you so much for your support of Trudge the Road. And one thing that maybe I could get you to do for us is when you at a meeting get to that point where they've got the non-AA related announcements, just bring up the fact that you've discovered this program, Trudge the Road, and that you can just go to YouTube and type in the search engine Trudge the Road Radio, and pow, all the episodes will show up. And in those occasions where maybe you can't get to a meeting or something's preventing you, you've really got one right here And we just want you to spread the word, and thank you very much for helping us out with that.
We also have a Facebook page. Just type Trudge the Road Radio in there. You can keep up with what's going on, and our Twitter page as well.
As well, if you're listening on one of your local radio stations, pass it along. And to all our affiliates, thank you. God bless for carrying Trudge the Road.
Yeah, in this final segment, we're going to talk about the promises, Jerry, which you are very, very astute when it comes to these. Well, you are.
I just experienced them, that's all.
Well, there's a reason that you're here, and it's because of the way you articulate things, and I think the promises are very, very important.
They are. It's what we're, what's the payoff? All this hard work. What's going to happen? What is going to happen? And we have promises here. It's not we think this might happen or this could happen. This will happen. And the promises, they come true in the 9th step. That's where the promises happen, and they're beautiful. And we could go over them here just a little bit. And those of you who are in recovery, you're going to be able to follow along real easily. For those of you who are not, and maybe have got a family member who is in trouble, listen to what are the promises of our recovery program. Now, the first sentence is, if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. Painstaking. What does that say? There's going to be a little bit of pain involved in getting better. This disease has a pathology that's no different from any other disease. If you have cancer, the process of getting better, you're going to experience some pain. The process of getting better from the disease of addiction, also, there is some pain involved. But you will be amazed before you're halfway through. Rich, that's where we lose everybody. That's where we lose everybody. They become amazed before they're halfway through. All of a sudden, well, the bills are getting paid. I'm getting along with my spouse. The kids aren't angry anymore. Things are going good at work. I'm amazed. I'm amazed. I guess I'm done. No, you are not. You're just amazed, but you're only halfway through. Now, we're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. Well, for heaven's sake, that's where we've been. We've been bound in our own prison. We have been in jail, locked up. We're going to be free of that, a new freedom and a new happiness. To those of you who are in recovery, you know exactly how that feels, not just how it sounds. We will not regret the past or wish to shut the door on it. This is really important. Can I quote my friend Reverend Jack here from the Care and Treatment Center?
Sure, why not?
Reverend Jack said, "You have never done anything so horrible in your life that God can't turn it into something magnificent." And that's absolutely true. We let that guilt and shame control us and think we're never going to get past this, when indeed it is going to become something much to our advantage, because we will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. That's the whole thing. That's what we were trying to find in the heroin, in the alcohol, in the pills, and whatever we were using, was just that peace. Now you are going to find it. This is just a different route. The goal is the same. And it says no matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. Now, not taking your inventory, I share the same story. We are those 3%ers who went to the absolute bottom. I was a street drunk, and you basically were a meth addict living behind a dumpster somewhere in Arizona.
Yeah.
I mean, it was horrible.
Yeah, that's true.
A horrible situation. And again, only 3% of folks end up at the bottom, if you will, skid row. Even though that's a state of mind, but that's a topic for later, is that experience that we had from being in that place becomes extremely advantageous for us in recovery, because we understand. And what is it that we understand for that new person coming in? Their pain. Because we've experienced a sense of pain that is really undefinable. But when we see it, we know it, and we can help out because we've been there before. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. If you're an addicted person, you certainly can relate to how that feels, that self-pity, that uselessness, that things in life, you're the only thing you're contributing is a pulse. And on the other side, those of us who love us or try to love us look at us and say, what is this? You become useless. You just sit there and feel sorry for yourself. And that's just part of the pathology of the disease. Now, the next sentence in the promises says, our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. And for me, that's part of that spiritual experience, that intervention in the same step number 2, where, I became open-minded to that there is a power greater than myself that will solve this dilemma. And when I started to feel that, my attitude changed. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. Well, any alcoholic can certainly identify with the fear of people and money. Now, I thought for years that sentence read that the fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. and we will all get rich. That is not in there. You just won't be afraid of it. Now, let me give you a perfect example. Now, both of us have friends in recovery who are stinking rich. I mean, rich, loaded, and have, all of the things in life that you have. But they work a 12-step program, and that is the focus of their life, and that is the focus of the accompaniment of their emotional well-being is in the 12 steps. And they enjoy that freedom, that peace and happiness we just spoke of. We also have friends who, rely on public transportation and live in little one-room apartments. And they also work this 12-step program, live it, and use it as their emotional circumference. And their level of happiness is no different than the person who has the millions of dollars. There is no difference. It's exactly the same. And that's part of the promises. We see it all the time. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. What baffled me? Life.
Right.
Life on life's terms baffled us. We will intuitively know. It's part of the gift. You do some work here, but you have to understand that this is a spiritual program, and there is a God who loves us, cares for us, and wants to help, and plays a very significant role in this, because we do just intuitively, after a while, know how to handle situations. Well, the next sentence sums it up. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. We will understand that. You will know that. It will be a palatable truth to you. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They're being fulfilled among us sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but they always materialize if we work for them. If we work for them. In my own recovery, there were so many times where I was the 1, 2, 3-er. I'd do the first 3 steps and then sit there and wait for God to give me the promises. Right. No, you got to do the work. And again, where does it happen? At that stage where you're making those direct amends to people. In the 9th step, that's where this comes true. And it's a miracle. It's what gives you the opportunity to be able to experience that life that you always wanted, that life you tried to find in alcohol, that life you tried to find in drugs. That peace, that happiness, that peace of mind. That's what we were all looking for. Take you back into your own drinking and drugging career. In those last couple of years, there was no party left. There was no excitement. There was no getting high. It was just a matter to survive and get that one moment of peace where just that pain, that suffering, that fear wasn't just overwhelming you at all times. Again, it's like a medicine. We're taking it as a medicine. We're going to get the same results here. We're just taking a different path. And that's what the 12 steps are. They're a path to rational behavior, a way for us to learn to exist within our culture and society, not only in a healthy manner, but in a productive manner and in a manner that will provide us, again, what we've been looking for from the beginning, peace of mind. And it's contagious. If you've got an addicted person out there in your life and they find this program and those promises come true in their life, it's contagious. You'll feel it too. It brings so much of us together. It rebuilds our lives. It gives us our families. It gives us our health. It gives us purpose here on earth. And that's a beautiful thing.
Amen, Reverend Jerry.
No, I didn't mean to go to preaching on you. It just means so much to me because I want to see people. It just breaks my heart when I go to a meeting of AA every day, and I see the parade of people who are just passing through. Right. And that's when most of them leave, as they get feeling better, the bills get paid, and jobs okay on off their back, and they stop, and the promises don't come true because you've only gone through maybe the first 1, 2, or 3 steps. That's the point, is to carry on further. Sponsorship is so important. Someone to encourage you to take that next step.
Right. You don't want to come, these are some of the same people you see stopping back 6 months later and having to start all over again.
And that's all, if you have to at least learn this time that this is what it does take.
We want to thank our guest, COLLEEN, today. We want to thank you for joining us. We want to thank CAREN Treatment Centers because Trudge the Road is sponsored by them. CAREN is a nonprofit leading provider of drug and alcohol addiction treatment. CAREN specializes in men's and women's services as well as young adult males and females, plus a relapse program and outpatient services. If you're concerned about yourself or a loved one, call 1-800-854-6023, or you can go to their website, CAREN.org. That's CARON.org. A big thanks to Matt, the producer.
He's the best. And can I thank all of our affiliate radio stations around the country for carrying Trudge the Road. God bless you. We appreciate that.
We truly do. And thank you, Jerry. I'm Rich. This is Trudge the Road on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
You've been listening to Trudge the Road. If you'd like to catch prior episodes, you can visit our YouTube channel by going to youtube.com and typing Trudge the Road Radio in the search engine. And keep listening for new episodes on this great radio station, which is part of the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
There is a new phase of recovery, and you see it in the pages of Renew Magazine and at RenewEveryday.com. Renew and RenewEveryday.com are changing the face of recovery for good. Each issue is filled with positive role models, life-affirming stories, encouragement, and ideas to help any life in recovery. Whether you're already enjoying an addiction-free life, have a loved one facing his challenges, or are considering recovery, Renew and RenewEveryday.com can support and inspire you. Join us. Check out RenewEveryday.com to learn more.
Hi, this is Rich, your co-host for the Trudge the Road radio program, and there's a question I get all the time, and that is, how do we catch prior episodes of Trudge the Road if we miss the radio show? And it's very simple. You just go to youtube.com and in the search engine, type in, without any spaces, Trudge the Road Radio, and all our shows will come up. We also invite you to like our Facebook page, which can be found by typing Trudge the Road Radio with spaces into the search engine. And thank you from Jerry and myself for listening to Trudge the Road.